To create startups that would put people to work here?
From fresh-faced to famous, Paul Ryan hopes to help Mitt Romney reach the nation's best-known address.
She's going to be the next vice president of the United States.
The challenges of his hometown.
Rock County lost 11,000 jobs.
Have become a stump-stop example.
We got a hard knock, but we are hardy people.
But can the popular congressman prevail in a new kind of race?
I'm like 50-50. I'm kind of undecided.
And will his far-right record get in the way of winning swing voters?
It's a very extreme vision for women's health.
Who is he?
Paul Ryan is not Sarah Palin.
How does he think?
I think we both had sort of an abiding affection for Ronald Reagan.
And can voters see him as the future? Tonight, Paul Ryan's Rise, a News 3 Campaign 2012 special. Here now are Sarah Carlson and Mark Kane.
The Janesville native is now a household name. Good evening, and thanks for joining us.
This is Paul Ryan's big night. In a little more than an hour, he will take the stage in Tampa and address the nation for the very first time.
And here is a live look inside the site of the 2012 Republican National Convention. The Tampa Bay Times Forum will be checking in and showing you what's happening there live throughout the hour tonight.
But first, we start here at home with a News 3 exclusive. When Paul Ryan stopped in Janesville Monday, he only talked to one Madison reporter.
Here is News 3's Jessica Arp with the congressman.
You had long told us, even the last time we talked to you back in April, weren't interested in the nation's highest office. What did Governor Romney say to change your mind?
Well, back last August when we looked at whether I should run for president or not, I didn't like the idea of a year-and-a-half long campaign. And I thought Mitt Romney was offering good leadership. When Mitt Romney asked me to join the ticket, he basically said, you share my values and you have the kind of experience that complements my experiences to fix this country's problems. I've been a reformer in Congress a long time. You know my record. And so when he basically said that to me, I said, yeah, okay, let's get this done.
What did you tell your kids about it?
You know, I told my kids what it would be like, and the thing that is exciting for us, in a way, is I'll be under the same roof with my family 7 days a week. I've been gone from my family 4 days a week ever since my children were born. And so there's the upside. The downside is Janesville, but we're never going to leave our home truly here in Janesville. And so, you know, the values I learned here growing up here, we're in my high school right here in Janesville. Those values of fix problems, be honest, use principles that were successful and built this country to the problems of the day to solve our nation's problems. And so we really believe that it's not too late to get this country on the right track, that it's not too late to get people back to work, to get higher take-home pay, and to leave our kids a better future, which if we stay with the current plan that President Obama has given us, to country in debt, further in doubt, more joblessness, higher poverty rates. If we stick with this plan, I really worry we're never going to give the kind of future we need to give to our kids that our parents gave to us, let alone getting people back to work or out of work today.
You talk a lot about Janesville and the speeches that you've been giving since you've been on the trail. What can you name specifically that in your time in Congress you've done to try to help your hometown?
Oh, gosh, you name it. First of all, I want to get this debt under control because the debt is a huge threat to our economy. Most jobs in Janesville are small business jobs, just like the rest of America. I think we need to give our small businesses breathing room to grow and survive. We need to have regulatory reform so they don't have all these unintended costs put upon them. We shouldn't keep raising tax rates on successful small businesses, which will make it harder for them to create jobs. You know, the Canadians just lowered their tax rate on all businesses to 15% in January. President Obama is promising that in January, the top tax rate on successful small businesses, where most people get their jobs here in Janesville, will go above 40%. That doesn't create jobs. So what I've been trying to do is make sure that the job creators in our communities, those successful small businesses, the people who have ideas, who want to work hard to build a business and create opportunity for people, that they have the ability to flourish and succeed in this global economy. And they've been doing anything but under the Obama economy. So the things I've done in Congress, create jobs, help small businesses, fix the problems that we have right now with our debt and our deficit before they get out of our control. That's the kind of skill, that's the kind of leadership and experience that Mitt Romney asked me to apply to his ticket so we can solve this country's problems before they get out of our control.
When you talk about those small businesses and the importance of startups, there's an incubator on the south side of Janesville that's now in place that started with $1.2 million in stimulus funds. And you've been a vocal opponent of the stimulus. Especially with that existing, how do you tell the people in Janesville that that wasn't money well spent?
I don't think borrowing and spending does not work to create jobs. You can find where if you put some money here or there that it will make a difference, but look at the broader economy. Unemployment has been above 8% for 42 months. The president said if you pass the stimulus, unemployment will never hit 8%. We have 23 million people who are out of work today. The stimulus didn't fix that. We have nearly 1 in 6 Americans in poverty today. It's the highest rate in a generation. The stimulus didn't fix that.
But is the stimulus not helping with that incubator to create startups that would put people to work here?
Are we putting the right kind of economic policies in place to get people back to work, to get higher take-home pay? And the answer is no. President Obama has put policies in place that are making it difficult for us to create jobs, to get higher take-home pay, to get people back to work. And so we shouldn't be thinking about an earmark here or a spending bill there. We should be thinking about, do we have the right economic policies in place that get the economy growth, that get opportunity, that get people going back to work? And the answer is no. President Obama is promising more regulations which stifle small businesses. He's proposing higher taxes on small businesses, which, by the way, those higher taxes go to fuel more spending. He's not proposed a single solution to prevent a debt crisis, which is imperiling Europe right now. And so I would argue that the president's economic policies are failing. And all you have to do is look at the economy, look at the unemployment rate, look at the poverty rate, look at the 23 million people who are struggling to find jobs today. We can do better than this. We know how to create jobs in this country and prosperity because we've done it before.
Whenever you've been campaigning, even today we saw there's a couple folks who disrupt the protest and disrupt and talk a lot about your Medicare plan. Do you at all think you risk being a distraction to your ticket because of your record?
Look, I think people want to reward political leaders for actually tackling tough challenges. Let's take a look at President Obama's Medicare plan. It's raid Medicare to pay for Obamacare. It's put this new board of 15 unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats today in charge of cutting Medicare, which will lead to denied care for current seniors. We're saying don't raid Medicare for Obamacare. Don't put this new board in charge of cutting benefits for current seniors. Keep the Medicare benefit as it is exactly known today for everyone who is in or near retirement. In order to do that, your generation, my generation, we need to reform it for the next generation so that it's there for us when we retire, but so that we can keep the current promise of Medicare for the current generation. President Obama raids Medicare, cuts Medicare, compromises Medicare for current seniors, and we don't agree with that.
My last question, what has this community taught you that you believe makes you uniquely qualified to do this job, or what will you take from Janesville with you?
Janesville is who I am. I'm 5th generation from Janesville. This community is my identity. It's what raised me. It's be faithful to your family, be faithful to your country, be faithful to your principles. Reapply the country's founding principles: liberty, freedom, free enterprise, self-determination, government by consent of the governed. Those are important ideas. But what Janesville really taught me is be honest, fix problems, don't let them get out of control, and look at the human side of things. My grandma was on Medicare when she lived with my mom and me. My mom's on Medicare. I've seen what happens when people in community support one another. I've seen what happens when you have prosperity and economic growth and how that can solve a lot of social problems in society. At the flip side of this, especially here in Janesville, I have seen what happens when your government doesn't have a good economic policy. I've seen what happens to people who go into poverty, who lose their jobs, who can't provide for their families if you have a failure of leadership in Washington. That's what I've seen living here in Janesville.
And Jessica Arp is live with us now from Tampa. Good evening, Jess. When you sat down with Ryan, does it seem like the small-town congressman is fazed by the national limelight?
Honestly, it really doesn't. He seems incredibly comfortable in his surroundings. He seems incredibly comfortable on the stump. When we sat down and talked, you could tell that it was nice to see a familiar face. I have spoken to him before, and so had some of the Milwaukee reporters who were speaking to him that day. But it was also nice to be back in his old high school, back in his hometown. He talked about how nice it was to be able to have dinner with his family 2 nights in a row. It is clear that he has had some practice with his budget plans over the years. He has had some practice talking about his policies, defending them, and he also is sticking a lot to these talking points that we hear in his stump speeches, but it's clearly not something that he seems overwhelmed by. He seems really quite comfortable.
Well, he's been in front of Wisconsin crowds a few times now, and it seems he always gets quite a reaction.
Yeah, it absolutely does. He gets quite emotional. The first time he appeared in front of a Wisconsin crowd in Waukesha, it actually brought him to tears to see people. Whenever he was in Janesville, he calls out people by name that he sees in the crowd. He always talks about half the crowd being his family. And even today here in Tampa, he spoke to the Wisconsin delegates and thanked them multiple times for all their support, for speaking to his family, speaking so kindly of him and supporting him over these years. He definitely seems to have quite a connection with the people back home, even though he's on the national campaign trail now.
And let's talk about these policy challenges. Does he seem frustrated by the criticism?
Really, no. He seems very anxious to defend his positions, to talk about his budget plan. In some of the criticism that's been leveled at him, it goes very specifically into his policies, into things. We tried to ask about some of those things in our interview, but he's very anxious to sort of explain the differences between himself and President Obama's plans. And frankly, that's one of the reasons why many people considered this a bold choice, a bold pick by Mitt Romney to choose Paul Ryan as his running mate, because he does have such a connection to specific issues. But he seems very anxious to talk to the American people about that, to talk to reporters about that, and it doesn't seem fazed by the fact that people challenge him.
All right, Jessica Arp, thank you. She's live at the Republican convention for us tonight. And we'll share more from Jessica's interview with the congressman later in our Campaign 2012 special.
Well, Ryan's first venture in politics, student representative on the Janesville School Board while attending Craig High. But a national office might have been on his mind even then. Here is News 3's Jennifer Hoff.
Emotional attachment.
At his Milwaukee, Wisconsin art studio,
This is the one that when I pulled this out, I knew I had something special.
Chip Giannakis is far from the Oxford, Ohio school where he studied finance.
It's been very fun. It's been painful at times.
The Miami University degree did him well for the decades he worked in the corporate world.
And then I very gently massage and get the materials off.
Then last year's discovery, buried deep in a farm field, propelled Giannakis into the private sector.
Nobody has industrial relics like this that never made it to the manufacturing process.
Creating circuit board art may be profitable, but it's not the career path Giannakis pictured.
If you had asked me what I would be doing 20 years ago, I wouldn't say making fine industrial art.
Ask his old fraternity brother, and Paul Ryan knew exactly what he wanted to do.
He said, and I can remember like it was yesterday, he will be president. Not I want to be president. I will be president.
The two met at MU in '88.
I haven't seen a lot of these pictures for a long time.
And pledged Delta Tau Delta together.
We were the very popular, well-known, athletic house.
4 years together, and a party at Paul's Aspen family home sticks out.
Put it this way, I'm glad Facebook wasn't around 20 years ago.
Otherwise, Giannakis says Paul spent most his time studying for a political science degree.
Paul was reserved in a lot of ways, and when it came to social settings, while I wouldn't call him a nerd, he kept to himself, and almost as if he knew that his actions then might control his future.
Despite being in a fraternity, an outdoorsman and fitness fanatic, Chip Giannakis says Paul Ryan was anything but popular. Rather, his commitment to the classroom at Miami University and his relationship with a particular professor helped shape his political philosophy and put him on his civic path.
We are good friends, and I certainly consider him a good friend.
Decades-long MU economics professor Dr. Richard Hart met Ryan his junior year.
He would come into my office during office hours, and we would talk about political philosophy, economic policy.
Particularly those of Nobel Prize winners F.A. Hayek and Milton Friedman, whose free market thinking is in line with Ryan's proposed budget plan, The Path to Prosperity.
We clearly need to reform the tax code. We need to slow the growth in government spending. We need to reform these entitlement programs to prevent us from having this debt crisis. And again, these are his program. His Path to Prosperity is a program that's designed to solve those problems.
Hart calls Paul a man of ideas, of wisdom.
I think a lot of these beliefs get formed through family and growing up. And maybe where I helped was when we had the discussions about economic policy.
Policies that would earn him positions as an aide, a staff economist, then a seat in the House of Representatives 6 years after graduation.
Here's Paul with the DELT pledge.
Now his name is on the national ticket, making old fodder among friends reality for Paul Ryan.
Really, the most important thing is that when he said he was going to be president, we didn't believe it, and he's going to get the last laugh.
For Campaign 2012, I'm Jennifer Hoff, News 3.
And our Campaign 2012 special is just getting started tonight.
Up next, a look at Janesville's slow rebirth after GM left town and how federal money is being pumped into projects to help it recover. We'll meet some of the thousands still out of work, hoping whoever gets elected in November can bring the jobs back.
The first week, I think we were numb and still kind of coming off of a cloud.
And later, News 3's Susan Simon sits down for a conversation with Tobin Ryan, Paul's older brother. What is the congressman like out of public view? We get an inside look at the close-knit family. Paul Ryan's rise, our News 3 Campaign 2012 special. We'll be right back.
You're watching Paul Ryan's Rise, a News 3 Campaign 2012 special.
And welcome back. Paul Ryan has spoken early and often about the Obama stimulus package, saying it failed.
So shortly after joining the ticket, Ryan took heat for signing letters requesting dollars for his district. And that's not the only time that he's asked for help. In 2009, GM Janesville closed for good, but not before Ryan voted to bail out the automaker and lobbied the company to stay open with an incentive package. News 3's Theo Keith explains Ryan's role and how his hometown has benefited from government help.
Just 2 miles, but a world away from Paul Ryan's home, the sun sets over an industrial park. The giant sprawled out here has long been asleep. For years, the General Motors plant made Chevys. It paid mortgages and got kids through college, too.
What's the Power Rangers about today?
As GM went, so did Janesville, and so it did for Chris Sitter. His kids will not get an education paid for with assembly line grit.
I saw the tears that last day, and I couldn't wait to get out of there, to be honest.
In December 2008, he was laid off from Lear, a GM supplier. The ripple effect left 11,000 without work that month. 16 years of assembling front seats for SUVs meant nothing, so Sitter went back to school.
Almost 3/4 to full classes of auto workers.
He, like Janesville, went looking for a new identity. As Paul Ryan moved up the ranks in Washington, he was trying to prevent a crisis back home.
$2.5 billion payroll. We lost $250 million of payroll in 1 year.
Janesville Democrat Tim Cullen and Ryan are from different political parties, but for their city that saw GM every time it looked in the mirror, they worked together.
He did a lot of things, had a lot of meetings, met with a lot of GM people. And what impressed me was he never put out a press release. He never tried to take credit for each individual act. He was just trying to win.
As you can see, the effort didn't pay off. GM Janesville is in permanent standby mode, but the government has helped in other ways here in Janesville's rebirth. In fact, it's given a lot of money to this city to try to get employers to hire new workers. The examples dot this blue-collar city. One of them is in this building, left empty after its former owner followed GM out of town.
Business is good. You know, a couple years ago it was rough.
Brian Hollis is vice president at FabMasters, a custom metal fabricator that moved in. The state gave the city of Janesville $5 million after GM left. Nearly $30,000 went to FabMasters and allowed the company to move into the bigger space.
Other than that, we'd still be struggling, but now it's also helping us bring more employees into our company.
Those are a handful of 1,500 estimated jobs that have come back to Janesville or are in progress. Down the road, $1.2 million in federal stimulus money is paying for an innovation center where startup companies get space and a corporate coach.
So we've made significant progress. Doesn't mean we don't have a long ways to go.
John Beckert is president of Forward Janesville, making him one of the city's biggest cheerleaders. He's also a Ryan supporter and says private businesses are responsible for most of the growth.
I don't think the rebirth of Rock County can be traced to federal assistance. It's a factor, but it's one of many factors, and quite frankly, it's quite far down the list.
The book isn't finished, but that is Janesville's story.
Daddy, thank you.
So what about Chris Sitter? He put General Motors in the past, and he doesn't think Paul Ryan or anybody else could have saved it.
They think that it's easy, that all Governor Doyle or Paul Ryan or whoever it was have to do is wave the little wand they have and, oh, GM's going to open the plant again. And, you know, unless you're in that situation and have dealt with it and seen all the stuff that we've gone through over the last 4 or 5 years, you're not going to really know, how much goes into it.
In May, Sitter graduated from Blackhawk Technical College's Medical Lab Tech program. He's working at Mercy Hospital in Janesville and earning about what he was when he got laid off. A man and a city no longer tied to the plant.
I love doing what I do. It's like living the dream.
For Campaign 2012, I'm Theo Keith, News 3.
But not everyone out of work has been so fortunate. Rock County reporter Margot Spann spoke to 3 people who all headed back to class to retrain, but have found little traction so far.
Almost anywhere you look in Rock County, there's a sign of another empty office.
It's just like really a tough time.
Down the road from scarce opportunity are the faces of those struggling to stay afloat. Amanda Nichols, Amanda Bushy, and Russ Douglas.
To me, what it means to be unemployed is honestly just to be in this hole that is continuously getting deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper, and by the time you get a way to help you, there's no way to fill the hole.
You don't feel like you're good for anything. You're just useless feeling.
To say nothing of the heartache.
Because I have a 10-year-old son. I don't want him to think of his mother as, useless or worthless.
All have gone back to school. Nichols completed a medical assistant program. Bushy hopes to be a nurse. Douglas finishes an information technology degree in December. Looking to the election, the former GM electrician knows what he's looking for.
There should be more money put into the economy to create jobs like for infrastructure.
Here in Janesville, Paul Ryan is pretty popular. Even folks who say they don't agree with his policies genuinely like him as a person. But with unemployment more than 9% countywide, they say they'll be paying attention this election cycle more than ever. Douglas plans to cast his November ballot for President Obama. Bushy and Nichols,
I'm like 50-50. I'm kind of undecided.
Aren't so sure.
Make a guess on, are they telling what they're really planning on doing, or are they just saying what we want to hear?
Yeah, he's a Janesville native, and that's nice and all, but we want action, people. We want the economy to be better.
They all want results, not rhetoric, hoping to see Park Place and the nation back at work. For Campaign 2012, I'm Margot Spann, News 3.
And of course, we do wish them luck. Let's head back to Tampa right now. On the convention floor, Puerto Rican Governor Luis Fortino just finished speaking, and a band will be playing next, setting up a video and then a speech by former Minnesota Governor Tim Pawlenty, one of the finalists for VP as well.
All right, and up next for us tonight, a talk with Tobin Ryan, Paul's older brother. He shares who he believes really shaped his brother's political future.
And a little later, Ryan has been called a quiet, social conservative. A look at his record, plus more of Jessica Arp's exclusive interview with the candidate himself when our Campaign 2012 special returns.
You're watching Paul Ryan's Rise, a News 3 Campaign 2012 special. Here again are Sarah Carlson and Mark Kane.
Well, Paul Ryan is the youngest of 4 children, all born and raised in Janesville.
In fact, Paul still lives just a couple of houses away from his brother and from where they grew up. Tobin Ryan sat down this week for a conversation with our Susan Simon and talked about what it's like to see his kid brother on the national stage.
He may know Paul Ryan better than anyone else. 47-year-old Tobin Ryan is Paul's older brother, the third of the 4 Ryan children. 42-year-old Paul is the baby of the family.
When you look at Paul, do you still see, your little brother that you'd punch in the arm and you share a bedroom with? I mean, can you grasp that he is the vice presidential nominee?
It does take a leap because he still is that little brother, and we still play pranks on each other. There's not a family photo when we're next to each other where the other guy isn't still trying to inch up a little taller than the other.
Paul Ryan.
Tobin watched with his wife and 2 children as Paul took the stage on the USS Wisconsin. He says it's all a little surreal.
The first week, I think we were numb and still kind of coming off of a cloud. And now it's sort of sinking in, and this is real, and it's happening. It's all around us. But we couldn't be more excited, more delighted for Paul, for Wisconsin, for the Romney-Ryan campaign.
How did he tell you? How did your brother tell you?
He called me on Friday night. I learned a few hours before you did, and he had just gotten off the phone with our mother, and called me, and I saw the phone ring. We were already in bed, and I said, "Oh, this is it." So I kind of knew. I didn't sleep a wink that night.
And how did your mom feel?
I think she was in shock. Absolutely. And but just our mom is such a rock, and her words to Paul immediately were, I love you, we're here for you, and we're proud of you.
What are some of your favorite childhood memories of him?
Our family did backpacking for summer trips, and 6 of us would pile into a station wagon, no air conditioning, and head west and find a mountain and bring some tents. And we had this really tough day, and we're all huffing and puffing and sitting down, and Paul is sitting over the side, and all of a sudden just breaks out singing "America the Beautiful." And we all looked over there, and we were just speechless. And so maybe there was something in his DNA, even at that early age, that gave us a hint into what kind of person he was going to become.
Paul studied economics in college, and shortly after graduating, went to work for former Congressman Jack Kemp.
I really thought so many things came together in those few years when he worked with Jack, where I think Jack tapped him on the shoulder and said, you ought to go do this. This is something that is meant for you. And I think Paul was probably thinking about, either a PhD in economics or something else.
When Paul was 16 and Tobin was entering his senior year in college, their father, Paul Sr., an attorney in Janesville, died of a heart attack.
It was Paul who found my dad, and obviously extremely traumatic situation, and but I tell you what, it was so tempting to stick your head under a pillow and grieve, but you do that and you pick yourself up. My brother invoked a phrase that my father said frequently, which is be part of the solution and not the problem. And if we ever complained in our household, if we ever observed verbally a challenging situation, you would hear this soft voice say, go fix it. Be part of the solution and not the problem. And when Paul said those words, on the USS Wisconsin, I know my siblings and I, got choked up because it sounded just like my dad.
Are you afraid his life may forever change? That he has this Norman Rockwell existence here in Janesville? Do you have any concern that everything is about to change?
It will be overwhelming, but it feels right.
Pride.
It just feels right. It's the right time for him. It's the right time for our country. We're absolutely proud of him, and he's going to make Wisconsin proud too.
Our thanks to Susan Simon. There is no question money has an influence on politics. The debate is over how much. With help from the nonprofit Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism, we delve into Ryan's voting record, asking, does it match his donor rolls?
If politics is a machine, it's money that keeps it moving. An analysis finds Ryan votes with his donors' interest nearly 3/4 of the time.
There's thousands of contributions that are recorded.
For more than a year, veteran investigative reporter Bill Leaders has led the Money and Politics Project at the Wisconsin Center for Investigative Journalism.
The money is just flowing in from so many different ways and on both sides of an issue often.
At our request, he and the team went to work, poring over data from the nonpartisan money tracking group MapLight. The task? Compare the source of the money to how Congressman Paul Ryan votes. In the last 4 sessions, on average, his votes favored donor positions 72% of the time, just 1 point higher than the congressional average. But in the 2009-2010 session, Ryan voted with his donors just 57% of the time. That same year, Fortney Stark, a California Democrat, favored his contributors while voting 92% of the time.
Does that mean that the system is corrupt, that every decision made by every politician is dictated by who gives the money? I don't think so.
Who funds Ryan? Investment, insurance, and health care firms. Two of his largest congressional contributors are Northwestern Mutual and PricewaterhouseCoopers.
We can't find a lot of evidence that donors giving a check to a specific candidate on a specific date caused their behavior to change. You don't find conservative groups giving to liberal members hoping to buy their support or the other way around. It's often giving money to your friends.
And who votes with their donors least often? Republican Ron Paul. For more on this story, head to WisconsinWatch.org or Channel3000.com.
And next, News 3 anchor Eric Franke is live in Tampa with a look ahead to Ryan's first ever address to the nation.
Then we'll examine Ryan's quiet stance on social issues and how programs to feed the needy might fare under his Path to Prosperity budget plan. Paul Ryan's rise, a News 3 Campaign 2012 special, returns after this.
Barack Obama.
This is a live picture from the Republican National Convention in Tampa. Tim Pawlenty from Minnesota is currently at the podium. Later tonight, Congressman Paul Ryan will take the stage. That'll happen in just under an hour.
And there could be a lot about Janesville in his speech.
News 3's Eric Franke also joins us from Tampa tonight. Eric, good evening. What are we expecting Ryan to say tonight, and what does he need to say to capture voters?
Well, Mark, it is a huge night for Paul Ryan. I'll tell you, just beyond the lights of those Coast Guard patrol boats at the Tampa Times Forum, Paul Ryan has basically reached the pinnacle in his political career. Millions of Americans will hear him talk tonight many of them for the first time. And this afternoon, Ryan looked confident, his family by his side as he toured the stage and podium. Now, we've learned a bit about what he will say tonight. Ryan will say he is ready to accept the calling of his generation to turn America around. He will make the case for Mitt Romney and say the team has a plan for a stronger middle class and a goal of creating 12 million new jobs in the next 4 years. And like all running mates, Paul Ryan will play the role of attack dog against his political opponents. Ryan will go after the president on Medicare. Here's an excerpt of the speech that we've obtained. Quote, Obamacare comes to more than 2,000 pages of rules, mandates, taxes, fees, and fines that have no place in a free country. The president has declared that the debate over government-controlled health care is over. That will come as news to the millions of Americans who will elect Mitt Romney so we can repeal Obamacare, end quote. Now, Congressman Ryan, of course, has railed for a long time now against what he calls Obamacare. That will continue tonight. He'll tell America that he and Governor Romney are ready to lead and will not duck the tough issues. Again, that speech expected to start at about 9:30 tonight. Mark?
So, Eric, should we expect Ryan to talk a lot about himself tonight or talk up the top of the ticket in Mitt Romney?
Well, you're going to see a little bit of both of those things tonight. He's going to introduce himself kind of to America, as I mentioned, for the millions of Americans who perhaps haven't really heard much about Paul Ryan until now. And the job of any vice president, of course, is to make the top of the ticket, in this case, Mitt Romney, look good. Now, on a personal note, he will make a mention, we've learned, of his father. Of course, you heard in Susan's interview with Tobin Ryan that it was Paul at 16 who discovered Paul Sr. deceased of a heart attack at the age of 55 back in 1986. So that will be an emotional moment to watch tonight as Paul Ryan gives this speech.
All right, Eric Franke live in Tampa. We'll see you tonight on News 3 at 10.
Thank you, Eric. And while Paul Ryan may be more vocal on his economic positions, many peg him among the most socially conservative in Congress. Our Danica Lewis looks at how different groups feel about where he stands on social issues and why he might choose to keep those a little bit quieter.
There are those who don't hesitate to put their social platforms on parade.
Defining marriage is between a man and a woman.
That Senate bill is a baby-killing bill.
We deserve a mother and a father, and we're going to have a set of laws that encourage that to be the case.
Paul Ryan, though, tends to keep those topics closer to heart.
He's going to run his campaign, we're going to run ours. I'm proud of my pro-life record.
Well, he's a conservative in every sense of the word.
UW political science professor Barry Burden says the Republican Party is quieting down on social issues.
They move back towards these kinds of technocratic budget issues, in part just because the economy has jumped to the front of the agenda.
There is not a public health or an economic reason to be against family planning services.
Nicole Safar with Wisconsin Planned Parenthood groups Ryan with the most extreme Republicans when it comes to calls on women's health.
It has really become a political wedge issue that the Republican Party has gone back to time and time again.
Similar sentiments are echoed at Fair Wisconsin.
Social conservatism means dividing people based on who they are.
Executive Director Katie Belanger eagerly spotlights Ryan's record as having little regard for LGBT rights.
We certainly work with some folks who are more on the fiscal conservative side, who understand that equality is about treating people with dignity and respect.
14 years on the House floor reveal a pro-life politician who co-sponsored bills to ban or at least defund family planning programs, especially those that perform abortions. Ryan said no to repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell, backed the Defense of Marriage Act, and voted to make same-sex unions unconstitutional. Some find this kind of record unexcusable, but others see it as exceptional and right in line with how all Republicans should be voting.
We're encouraged. We think he adds a nice element of a conservative values to the GOP ticket.
Julaine Appling with Wisconsin Family Action is looking for the full conservative package, and she wants to see this one shipped back to Washington for a vice presidential term.
Especially with the addition of Paul, we set up a true ideological difference that is very stark.
A difference that has divided Wisconsin before and will likely draw a line across the nation come November. For Campaign 2012, I'm Danica Lewis, News 3.
Now, with the nominations cemented, the debate over Romney-Ryan budget proposals will be at full speed until Election Day.
And those who watch out for the neediest worry that they'll end up worse off than they already are. Andy Choi takes a look at the Ryan budget through the lens of the federal food stamp program.
when push comes to shove, I need all I can get.
Those who turn to LaShonda Dykeman's workplace window only know half the struggle.
I only make $7.25.
As customers pay for meals often exceeding Dykeman's hourly wage, the 24-year-old knows hunger at the drive-thru pales to the stomach's rumbling at home.
Struggling and worrying about meal to meal it's scary.
The money Dykeman earns at work isn't enough, as the majority of her family meals come from food stamps.
That's about the $300 in food stamps besides hamburger and maybe some pork chops.
Raising 2 boys and a baby girl on her own, Dykeman says the assistance is a blessing, but comes with a sense of guilt.
Makes me feel like a failure.
Dykeman's family is part of a growing number of families in Janesville turning to a federal food stamp program known as SNAP. Data from the Department of Health Services shows SNAP enrollments in Rock County jumped 8% from 2006 to 2010.
We know for a fact that we are not going to be giving our children a better standard of living.
Paul Ryan acknowledges the higher demand for SNAP in his Path to Prosperity budget, but calls the current structure of public assistance programs unsustainable. Ryan proposes converting the SNAP program into a block grant tailored to each state's demands.
What the block grant does is to basically say we are capping the size of the program at some fixed amount. Regardless of what happens with the economy, this is the amount that you have to run the program with.
UW consumer science professor Judy Bartfeld acknowledges the ideology behind Ryan's proposal, but says a block grant would eliminate the safety net component of SNAP, potentially leaving out scores of needy families in Ryan's hometown.
If we had block granted the program, say when we had 13% of the population who needed it to provide assistance, it's fairly straightforward to see that it would not have had the capacity to meet the need that it's been serving in the intervening years.
I wonder how the Lord's going to fill this shelf.
The shelves at Janesville's Salvation Army food pantry is a stark reminder hunger remains a priority.
Because that's who eats here. It's a Janesville neighbor of Paul Ryan that comes here and eats. How does he know that neighbor?
Even all the other politicians. It's okay for them because they don't know how it feels to tell your kid, you can only have 1 burger because we have to save enough for tomorrow.
And as Janesville's hungry wonders about tomorrow's meals,
as long as their belly's full, I'm okay.
Dykeman hopes lawmakers remember the struggle for food will remain long after Election Day. For Campaign 2012, I'm Andy Choi, News 3.
Well, before we say goodnight, we're going to check in with Bob Schieffer from CBS News on how Ryan is viewed in Washington.
And the rest of Jessica Arp's exclusive one-on-one interview with Paul Ryan when our Campaign 2012 special returns.
You're watching Paul Ryan's Rise, a News 3 Campaign 2012 special.
Well, before being announced as Mitt Romney's running mate, Paul Ryan was recognizable, but held onto the ability to easily retreat to private life.
But now he could be a household name for years to come. Editorial director Neil Heinen spoke with CBS News chief Washington correspondent Bob Schieffer about how Ryan is viewed in Washington.
Bob, what is your perspective of Congressman Ryan? How well do you know him, and what do you think of him?
He is very well liked in the Congress, even by those on the other side of the aisle. David Obey, who is a rather cantankerous Democrat and is proud to go by that title, who's, I guess, the ranking Democrat on the Budget Committee, says, how can somebody be so nice yet have ideas that are so wrong? But that's generally the way Congressman Ryan's viewed on Capitol Hill. He's very well respected by people on both sides of the aisle and liked by people on both sides of the aisle.
Bob, do you think that the scrutiny of vice presidential candidates has changed a little, particularly given Sarah Palin's candidacy? Does Paul Ryan perhaps go under the microscope a little more than we've seen in the past?
Paul Ryan is not Sarah Palin. Let me just, I would be glad to put my professional reputation on the line on that one. Paul Ryan is a much different candidate than Sarah Palin. You're going to get scrutiny. I mean, that's the nature of the game. And you have more media than ever now, so the scrutiny is bound to be more intense than it ever was. But Paul Ryan's been in public life for a long time. I don't expect anybody is going to turn up very much that we didn't already know about.
Great. Bob Schieffer, thank you very much for your help. Great perspective. Thank you.
You bet, Neil.
Tonight we talked about Paul Ryan's quiet stance on social issues, how entitlement programs might change under his leadership, and the slow rebirth of his hometown.
How does he respond? Here's the rest of Jessica Arp's exclusive interview.
You haven't talked much in the past necessarily about your social conservative views, with the exception of this week in the news about Congressman Akin. Why do you not talk much about your specific views on abortion or gay marriage?
Well, because people aren't asking me to talk about this. What people are asking me, where are the jobs? They're asking me, what are you going to do to get people back to work? Household income has gone down on average for families over the last 4 years by $4,000. The middle class has been hit the hardest in the Obama economy. That's what people are talking to me about. They're not talking to me about various different social issues. They're talking to me about, how can I get better take-home pay? How can I get a job? How can we get economic growth in America?
But what should people know about your views on those specific issues?
I have a 14-year track record in Congress that I'm very proud of. I'm very proud of my pro-life record, of my various views, which are in keeping with Wisconsinites. Wisconsinites voted to send me, with an average 63%, back to the House of Representatives because they agree with my views on these various issues. But what Wisconsinites and Americans are asking me today, where are the jobs? What are you going to do to get the economy growing? What are you going to do to get people back to work to have higher take-home pay? That's specifically the solutions we're offering so we can get this country growing again.
Your budget has become a big issue, discussions of Medicare, entitlement programs. We talked to some groups that help the needy here that you actually even mentioned today in your speech that say they have pretty big concerns about the food stamp program, about changes. How do you justify your policies on these issues to your hometown who says they need these?
So we want to make sure food stamps go to people who need food stamps. The reforms that we passed in the House simply say you have to be actually eligible for food stamps in order to receive food stamps. We don't want the work requirements to be removed from welfare, because what we learned here in Wisconsin is by getting people from welfare to work, it gets them out of poverty. We want people to get job training so they can get a good skill. We want people to be moved from being dependent on welfare back to a paycheck so they can get themselves out of poverty. We have proven that the ideas of getting self-sufficiency, getting job training, getting people back on their feet again with W-2 here in Wisconsin, with economic growth, that is the secret to getting people on a life of self-sustainability, on a life of upward mobility. That stands in sharp contrast to the fact that the president, in the midst of a debt crisis, hasn't offered a single solution to fix this debt crisis. The Senate, the United States Senate hasn't passed a budget in 3 years. We have a law that says every year Congress has to pass a budget. The president hasn't offered a solution in 4 years, just more trillion-dollar deficits. We've made the tough choices to say, here's how you get this country out of debt. Here's how you avoid a European-like debt crisis, which if it were happening in this country, then the people who get hurt the first and the worst in a debt crisis are the people who need government the most, the poor, the sick, the elderly. Those are the people who get hurt the first and the worst when the government keeps running up the credit card and triggering a debt crisis, which is what we avoid and preempt by offering solutions, by making the tough choices, by providing the leadership the country needs.
Wisconsin's not an easy state to win for Republicans. How do you try to move it into your column?
I have learned in a congressional district that went for Dukakis, Clinton, Gore, and Obama, people want to be spoken to like adults. They don't want to be pandered to like children. They want solutions. They want people of principle to tell them who they are, what they believe, and what are their solutions to get people back to work. That is what I've been doing here, and people have been very good to me here. I've worked hard to earn their trust. And I think the trust that I've been given by the people I've been representing is they want people to be honest with them and to offer solutions. That's precisely what I've done. And I think that's the kind of leaders they want. And that's why I think we have a good chance of winning Wisconsin.
And Paul Ryan will take the stage at the Republican National Convention in about 30 minutes. Live coverage from CBS News is up next. Then full coverage in our extended 10 p.m. newscast running until 10:50 tonight.
And thank you so much for joining us for our Campaign 2012 special. We'll see you in about an hour.
Good night, everyone.